Hey, folks, welcome back to another Peach Pundit Podcast, joined by my good friends Buzz Brockway and Scot Turner. We took a week off last week because Buzz was feeling a little under the weather. Buzz, we're glad to see you're alive and healthy and doing well. And
glad to be alive and healthy.
Much better. Just remember to mute if you have to cough.
Yes.
Scot,
good to be back.
Scot, it's good to see your pretty face.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so sweet.
I mean, I think in the spirit of our usual disagreements, we're going to start it right off with, what I don't think is a substantive disagreement.
Right.
It's just more of like a process disagreement. So yesterday, the United States House of Representatives passed legislation. It is, now I have to go back and find the legislation. I think it was H.R. 3005 to remove the bust of Roger Taney, who wrote the infamous Dred Scott decision in 1857, as well as statues for people who voluntarily served in the Confederate states. So that's roughly 7 statues around the Capitol, including one of Georgia's, the statue of Alexander Hamilton Stevens, which is currently on display in the old House of Representatives chamber and Statuary Hall. For those of you who are not familiar with the United States Capitol building, each state can send 2 statues for display inside the Capitol. Those are held in the old House of Representatives chamber, which is actually a really cool room if you ever have a chance to go into it, because you can whisper and hear it on the other side of the room if it's completely quiet around you. It's really awesome.
Yep.
And then the crypt, those are the main ones. There are other statues elsewhere in the Capitol as well. But this specifically targets particularly southern states like Georgia, Mississippi, who has Jefferson Davis as one of their 2 statues. There's one from North Carolina. There the statue of Robert E. Lee from Virginia, and so on. So this bill passed. It passed easily-ish, 285 to 120. Every Democrat voted for it. Every Democrat who was present and voting voted for it. 67 Republicans voted for it, and 120 Republicans voted against it. 24 Republicans were not present for whatever reason. Just looking over some of the votes, that it does not appear that there were any Georgia Republicans who voted for the bill, but there were again 67 Republicans who voted for it. One of the arguments that was made during this debate was from Congressman Barry Loudermilk, who actually was in charge of the minority side of the debate. And based on everything I've seen and heard, Congressman Loudermilk made it pretty clear that he actually it sounds like he believes the statues should be removed, but it should be done a certain way, which is through state action rather than Congress saying these statues are no longer allowed. And he also complained about process as well, because the bill was never marked up by committee and go through the usual process. There were no hearings held or anything like that. It's just referral to the floor, and that's it. And typically speaking, those arguments, I sometimes agree with them and sometimes don't. This is one of those areas where I don't really agree with it. Scot, you actually, before you left the Georgia General Assembly, I think we've discussed this before on the podcast, you introduced a resolution to get rid of the statue of Alexander Stevens with a replacement statue of Martin Luther King. And that bill was not considered. You introduced it, I think, right after the legislature came back from COVID, at my urging. In fact, I think I was driving through Richmond, Virginia, oddly enough, when I called you and asked you to introduce
Give me the mic.
Yeah,
Let me tell you the rest of the story.
Scot, I'm going to turn it over to you because you got name dropped yesterday on the House floor.
Which is a high watermark for my political career, by the way. But
by the way, you're welcome.
Yeah. So for those of you who are longtime listeners of this podcast, you know Jason and I argue quite a bit. But he called me one day and he said, he let me know you're what, 7th, 8th generation Georgian, Jason. And so
something like that.
Yeah. So, and he let me know his family history and why it was personal to him that every time he walked in the U.S. Capitol and he saw the statue of Alexander Hamilton Stevens, he had an emotional reaction. And, Alexander Stevens wrote the cornerstone speech, which he said out loud, these are his words, be very clear, that he said that African Americans were only good for slavery.
Yeah.
That's a loose paraphrasing, but it's pretty much the point. And that's the reason why it was important that the Confederacy secede from the United States Union. And so, there's a lot of stories in history, and a lot of people have this perspective that slavery wasn't the cause of the Civil War. However, you have this guy who was the vice president of the Confederacy, who we've honored as a state, saying that black people are only good for slavery. Those were his words. And it was outrageous to me. I read the speech. We were on our COVID break. We're on our COVID recess. We came back. It was after crossover day. So the bill wasn't going to go anywhere anyway. I made a floor speech. My very last floor speech I ever made was about this resolution, asking for it to get special consideration because of the environment that we're in. I thought it would be a healing moment for us to recognize this great human being and Martin Luther King Jr. and replace the statue. The number one advocate for me, that when I introduced that bill, the very first phone call I got from anybody was from my own congressman, Barry Loudermilk. And Barry called me and said, I'm going to issue a press release unless you tell me no, saying I support this. And Barry has a history, Congressman Loudermilk has a history of trying to be ancillatory towards the African-American community about history within our state. He introduced the Freedom Resolution while he was a sitting senator in this state, where he tried to publicly condemn the existence of slavery. The only Confederate state that has not done that is Georgia. And so he has over time considerably taken steps. Before there was this concept called woke, Barry was aware that history has had an impact on our current situation, our current society, and as it sits, and that there was healing that still needed to happen. He was recognized that years and years ago when he was in the Georgia legislature. So Barry goes to the floor yesterday and he mentions his support. He name dropped me, obviously. That's kind of cool. I don't know how many people get name dropped during a floor speech by their congressman. Yeah, I was pretty stoked about that. But here's the reality is Barry supports the idea of replacing the statues. But his overarching point is, wouldn't it be better for society if states weren't forced into this, but they did it? And he pointed to some examples, like in North Carolina, where they have wanted to replace one of their statues since 2015, and they can't even get an organized meeting to move that proposal forward. And it passed their Senate unanimously and their House overwhelmingly. So there's huge amount of bipartisan support to do it in North Carolina. And they've been waiting 6 years and they can't get it done. So his point was, let's let the states, it would be better if the states voluntarily did this and let them move forward. I mean, if you want to remove the statue, that's one thing. Choosing how to replace it is another. But overall, that there's a process argument there that he objected to. But that being said, and it's a nuanced argument, and I know we're not fans of nuance in our current political dialogue, but he completely supported me. He was on the record. He went on Fox News and CNN and did interviews on this particular issue, advocating for what I was trying to do here. So I know he supports the concept. And but I can't argue with the guy if he's looking at the process and saying there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. Because there's a lot of times as a legislator, and Buzz can talk about this too, there are examples of, well, I'm for that, but I don't want to break the legislative norms to get it done.
Well, I mean, Buzz, I'll let you jump in here because I'm going to look up something Loudermilk said yesterday because I want to clarify one thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it is annoying that it is. It is kind of the political climate we're in. You try to make an argument like Barry's trying to make, and I think he's right on the merits of the idea. As Scott has outlined, he's been a long supporter of this kind of thing. But what's trending on Twitter? 120 Republicans. This is the phrase that's trending on Twitter. And what's trending on Twitter is that 120 Republicans are against the removal of Confederate statues from Statuary Hall in Washington. So it's very difficult to have these kinds of conversations, to talk about process. It's really up to leadership to restore these, to protect the institution of the Congress and the institution of the Senate and the normal ways of doing things instead of just breaking it to score political points, which, what seems to be going on here. And we'll see. I'm at Scott. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. The resolution you introduced, someone else picked up the ball and carried it this year, right? I mean, there was an attempt. I'm sorry, I can't remember how far it went, but there was an attempt.
It was approved by committee, and it was to replace the statue of Stevens with a statue of John Lewis.
Right.
And it was approved by committee, and then it just sat in rules.
Right.
Yeah.
It was not. It was never called to the floor. There was never any Senate action on anything like that.
Because I think there already is. I guess Georgia's kind of unique in that we technically have three, because there is a statue of Martin Luther King within the Capitol, right? It's not one of ours, but
it's a
there.
bust. It's a bust, and it was placed there by Congress. It was not placed there by the states. And so for me, there's a significant difference between a bust and a statue, first and foremost. And the second,
I get that.
yeah, and the second part is, the statuary hall is a place of honor. One of the things people would hit me with is, you're trying to destroy history. No, I'm not. I in the resolution, we created a committee to find an appropriate place for the statue to be displayed in context of its meaning and its cultural significance.
Yeah, I mean, his old house is off I-20 going towards Augusta. Send it there.
Yeah.
Well, we have a friend, Buzz and I have a friend who's offered to take it down to South Georgia and put it in his front yard. So, I mean, there will be a home for it, and it's not being destroyed, and we're not destroying history, because history happened. What we're saying is there are Georgians who are more worthy of the honor of that particular spot. We only get 2 as a state. Yeah. And there have been dozens of Georgians.
I mean, we swap them out all the time. There's plenty of Georgians worthy of recognition.
California replaced one of their statues with one of Ronald Reagan, which is my personal favorite in Statuary Hall, because they included bits of the Berlin Wall in the pedestal. So he's literally standing on the Berlin Wall. And so states do this, and they do it for people who are of high honor from their states. Yeah. And I cannot believe that since Alexander Hamilton passed away, or since we started this tradition of putting these statues there, that there's no other Georgian that's more worthy of that honor than him. And there has to be.
Yeah. So the other Georgian on display, the statue of the other Georgian on display is Crawford Long. That was placed in 1926. The statue of Alexander Hamilton Stevens was placed in 1927. And yeah, I mean, some other like founding fathers. You have Connecticut has Roger Sherman, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. You have Jonathan Trumbull, those were both placed in 1872. Caesar Rodney from Delaware, another signer of the Declaration of Independence, placed in 1934. I mean, these are people. Kentucky has Henry Clay. Maryland has Charles Carroll. You see, and then Georgia has Alexander Hamilton Stevens, and Mississippi has Jeff Davis, which was placed in 1931. Going back to Congressman Loudermilk's comments, and look, I've known Barry since roughly 2004. He's a great guy. I'm not I think his point here. So he's making 2 separate process arguments. The first one is, because I'm looking here, he says this bill was rushed to the floor without a hearing or markup in the committee on House administration. Okay, you have voted for bills that have been rushed to the floor without markup or hearing. It depends on which party's in power. You have voted for those bills. So that argument is not one I am sympathetic to, although I get it. And yes, it is irregular, because theoretically, at least, irregular, because you're going outside the normal legislative process. Happens all the time, regardless of which party's in power. And I would put my next paycheck on it that he has voted for bills that were not marked up or were not subject to hearing. So there's that. Now, his other process argument that there is a committee. It's not the House. It's the website for this committee is housed by the House Administration Committee, and it's actually called the House Committee on House Administration. But there's a joint committee of Congress on the library, and that is a bipartisan, bicameral committee that, according to its website, has not had a meeting since 2019. So we're talking, 2 years, April 30th, 2019, according to this website. They actually have at least one member listed who is no longer in Congress. That's Senator Pat Roberts, who served on the committee in the last Congress. He retired.
They told me if I voted for Trump, chaos would continue in the Congress, and they were right.
And they were right. So I guess my point to all this is like, yeah, sure. Like if North Carolina, as Congressman Loudermilk has passed a resolution, if Georgia next year, as a Republican election year ploy to win some support from Black voters, votes on their resolution votes on the state's resolution to remove the statue of Stevens or replace it with one of John Lewis. Yeah, the committee's going to have to consider those because states are taking action individually. I'm certain that the statue of Robert E. Lee, given the current political makeup of Virginia, would be recalled and they would replace it with someone else. So there are things. I mean, the committee does need to get its act together. I don't disagree, but even if the committee gets its act together, it should, I think, still amend law to prohibit the placement of these statues, as well as to get rid of the bust of Roger Taney that's sitting in the old Supreme Court chamber and currently inside the Capitol. Yes, among the other things, there is the old Supreme Court chamber is also in the Capitol, and there is a bust of Taney in there. But that was before the Capitol. I think before the Supreme Court met in the old Senate chamber. And before they all moved across the street, but. Yeah, I mean, I think of those things as an affront. Emotional is probably the wrong way to say it. I mean, like emotional, I think of like, I'm sitting there crying. Scott.
No,
I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
Yeah. That's not what I meant.
Annoyed. I get annoyed. It pisses me off.
You may not be in touch with your emotions, but being annoyed is an emotion. So yeah.
You say emotion. You say emotional, and given the fact that I grew up listening to a lot of emo music, that's.
Well, listen, I just hear.
I'm teasing, Scott. I'm teasing.
I just hear you say you hate so many things, and hate is an emotion.
Hate is. I use hate and dislike interchangeably.
Right. Yeah. Well.
Buzz.
Yeah. And you say you dislike or hate a lot of things. I'm just saying.
I hate you right now, Buzz.
Yeah, I know you do.
This whole conversation about history and the appropriateness of statues and other forms of public recognition is one that we in the South have needed to have for a long time. And I think Governor Kemp just recently appointed somebody to head the Stone Mountain Association who is going to take a look at this. There's going to be there's going to be a change at Stone Mountain. It's going to include the other side of the story, rather than just being a Confederate memorial. It's going to start to tell us stories about, what was going on in the lives of African Americans at that time, and that's appropriate. That should have happened a long time ago. And so, to me, this is kind of part of that debate. What statues that the state of Georgia sends to put on display in the Capitol should be part of that debate. And yeah, it's time for Stevens to come back home. So that's appropriate. And just on a personal note, a few weeks back, my family and I went up to Nashville. We ended up going to, Belmead Plantation, which is famous for horse racing. Many of the Kentucky Derby winners come from a direct line from horses that were there. But there's the display there made note of that. Yes, it was a plantation during the antebellum time, during the Civil War. The person who owned the house ended up going to jail because he was part of actively supporting the Confederacy. But at the same time, it told the story of African Americans were there. And what you find is the person who was the horse trainer, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, is legendary. He was an African American guy. He was a slave on the property and then became a free man and stayed there and became legendary, and still to this day legendary in the horse racing world because of the work he did as a horse master. Those kind of stories should be told. Everybody should know that story.
Well, go to Monticello. I mean, I went to Monticello last summer, and yeah. You can't walk 5 feet without getting the story of Jefferson and his slave Sally Hemings and the children he had with Sally Hemings. And same thing with the Jefferson Memorial in Washington D.C. They have the quotes around the pillars, and you have that one quote as it relates specifically to slavery. So I mean, it's I'm in agreement that, I mean, obviously, I think anybody who reads what I tweet or reads what I say when I talk about this particular issue, it's something I'm highly sensitive to, But I also recognize my family's history. I know that my ancestors fought on the side of the CSA. I know my ancestors, at least some of my ancestors, owned slaves. They owned people as property. It's not something I'm particularly proud of. I can't help it. but it's not something I'm proud of. And I do think we have to acknowledge the mistakes of our past, the stains on our past, and try to rectify those wherever we can. And part of that is acknowledging that these statues, whether they're in the town square of Covington, Georgia, because there's a hot debate over the statue here in Covington. I know there was one taken down in Decatur. I think there have been other cities around the state where those statues have been removed. That they're highly offensive to a large segment of our population. And depending on the area, it could be a majority community of people of color. It could be 30% Black. It could be whatever, but it's offensive to them, and we should be working and trying to make amends and recognizing the stains in our history and trying to make sure they never happen again. And that means learning from our history and making sure they never happen again.
Right. I mean, when it comes to the Confederate statues, I don't want to see them destroyed. I just want there to be proper context around them, and they don't necessarily deserve a spot of honor anymore. Yeah. There was a time and place for that. That time has passed. We need to move on. There are other places. There are other people who are more worthy of those honors in those places, and let's maintain them. Let's preserve them, but let's also tell the whole story, as Buzz is saying. There are people who fought for the CSA for different reasons than just slavery, and we can acknowledge that. And there are people who believe that they were just trying to leave, right? Yeah. And we can acknowledge that. That's part of the story. But let's tell the whole story.
Yeah.
And when we just have a statue without context, or it doesn't mention the other side of the story, then it can become offensive to people. Yep. But if you put it in like the Stone Mountain thing, I really hope that we can tell the whole story, and also the story of why people thought it was appropriate to carve that into the side of this, unique geological feature, and let's tell that story too. And tell the whole thing, all warts and all. Let's just make it a giant museum that tells, and then the person who is experiencing it can walk away with the full picture. And I think that's completely appropriate, and that's the direction that we need to happen. Preserve, but tell the whole story.
Yeah. People need to stop identifying, or that's the thing I've never understood. Again, my family going back to the late, I guess 18th century, early 19th century in Georgia. I've never understood why we have chosen to identify so hardly or so passionately, at least collectively, with this Confederate identity, because to me it's shameful. And because you look
at to them though.
I understand it's not to them. I mean, I know where I come. I know who my ancestors are too. But at the same time, it's I also understand that they were wrong, and it doesn't simply saying, well, this was their time. It was not. I mean,
it's an oversimplification.
That's a big oversimplification.
It is.
100 years before, you had Jefferson acknowledging. In fact, the early drafts of the Declaration of Independence didn't just include condemnation of the slave trade; it included condemnation of slavery itself.
Right. I think the Meacham biography on
American Sphinx.
On Jefferson, the biography Art of Power.
Oh, okay.
Explores how a guy who loves human liberty so much could also have the opposing viewpoint of owning humans as slaves, as property. And it's really it's one of the better biographies that I've read on presidents, and Jefferson happens to be one of the more fascinating characters to me in history.
Text me that after the podcast, because I think I would like to buy that one. I have the American Sphinx, which is really good, but I don't think
I will be happy to lend you my copies right over there.
I have a bad tendency not to give books back, so you should just text me so I can go buy my.
I have a hard copy and I have the audio book. So,
so in other Georgia related news, we're getting sued. By the federal government. The Department of Justice has filed a lawsuit against the state of Georgia over SB 202. So which one of you guys wants to lead us here? Because I have not looked into this at all.
Let Buzz take the lead on this one.
Well, excuse me. Dan McLaughlin in National Review had I think a pretty good article about it. We all know the complaints about that bill, the objections that folks such as Stacey Abrams and Democrats have registered. There's already a number of lawsuits against the bill already. But what McLaughlin makes the point, and I think this is a pretty interesting one, there's a pending case in the Supreme Court that will be ruled upon, I guess this week, maybe as early as tomorrow, that deals with two aspects of this bill.
The Brnovich case.
Yes, coming out of Arizona. The deal. So what? And McLaughlin's making the case that this was politically motivated. Shocker. The Merrick Garland, may rest in peace, not on the Supreme Court, but now be acting very politically in the. Borrowed that from Comfortably Smug there, but it seems to be very politically motivated. And in McLaughlin's view, in his article in National Review, not really on firm legal ground. And you might have two of the aspects of the big parts of that lawsuit knocked right out from under you before you ever get going this week. So it's a mess. And I think, excuse me, it's to me, there's already plenty of lawsuits about this that have been filed by local groups and other groups to fight out the various aspects of this law. Why the federal government decided to get involved seems silly to me, and probably has more to do with trying to make the case, either anger that they can't get HR 1 or House 1 or S1 passed, or an attempt to build momentum to try to get something like that passed in the future. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Our friend Wes Cantrell had an interesting post. He has pointed out time again, as well as other members of the legislature who voted for SB 202, how the features of SB 202, which have been maligned in the media and by the left, do not pay attention to the fact that even with the passage of SB 202, there are more objective stats that you can point to say that voting in Georgia is easier and more accessible than they are in Delaware, as an example. Or we have maintained no excuse absentee ballot applications as an example here in Georgia. In Delaware, there is no concept of no excuse absentee ballot applications. Right. So it's easier today to vote in Georgia than it is in Delaware. And so what are you pointing to that makes Georgia's law as it sits today with SB 202 more restrictive than other states, like the home state of the president of the United States, Joe Biden? And so it'll be interesting to see how this lawsuit plays out. But to me, it seems like it's nothing more than a political ploy to keep it up in the front of people's minds and say, oh yeah, go DOJ, sue those sneaky Republicans. But it's not, there's no objective number, there's no objective fact, there's no objective feature that they can point to and say that voting in Georgia as a result of SB 202 is harder than it is in other states. And so when Georgia goes and makes a defense on this case in federal court, they're going to point to the selective prosecution of Georgia and say, why are you picking on us? And I think they're going to have a really strong case to stand on in that case.
So
another thing, a last point I'll make, I think it's probably also a shot across the bow to other states that might be considering legislation. Texas, I believe, attempted to pass some. There was some maneuvering by the Democrats that may have blocked it. So may have to go be taken up in a special session. A few other states have passed stuff. So I think it's also a shot across the bow to states saying, if you pass bills that we don't like, we're coming after you.
So just so you guys know, the Supreme Court ends its term tomorrow. So this opinion will come down tomorrow. And consider the source here. This comes from Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post. I'm a subscriber to the Post, but I do
Joe
not.
Biden's favorite reporter, apparently.
Yeah, I am not a Jen Rubin fan, like in the least bit. Jen Rubin says that the Department of Justice's case has been Brnovich proofed, which means that the lawsuit Again, this is according to Jim Rubin.
What does that mean? I'm not familiar with this term.
This is what the Washington Post. So this is not Jim Rubin block quotes this from another Post story. She says, the article says, given the bent of the court, there are concerns it will create a more rigorous standard for Section 2 challengers to meet than the quote results unquote close quote test. That the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit used to invalidate 2 restrictive Arizona provisions. The results test requires plaintiffs to establish that the challenge provision has a discriminatory impact on minorities, which is explained by the jurisdiction's history of discrimination. In Brnovich, the court could replace this discriminatory impact test with a more stringent one that requires proof of intentional discrimination to invalidate a new law. The Justice Department pointedly accuses the Georgia legislature of intentional discrimination against minority voters.
Yeah, McLaughlin talks about that in his article and points to other cases that have, for example, Alabama's, since this case will be filed in the 11th Circuit, the 11th Circuit has upheld Alabama's voter ID law, showing that while it may slightly impact African Americans more than others, that does not rise to the level that's required by how the Supreme Court has ruled on these things before. So I think with all due respect to the great leading conservative Jen Rubin, I think she's full of it there. This lawsuit's in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, the lawsuit's going to go through. It's going to go through the process. It's going to go through the district court process, the appellate court process, and then it'll head to the Supreme Court. So we'll have an answer in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a political ploy. I mean, it's meant to continue to churn and foment dissent and division.
So bringing it back home, because we got a few local things to discuss before we call it a day. So the ex-president of the United States, Donald Trump, during an interview with Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show. Apparently Trump said, quote, "Walker told me he's going to run, and I think he will," close quote. He said he had dinner with him a week ago. He's a great guy. He's a patriot. He's a very loyal person, which is really all Trump cares about. Now, this comes on the heels. Scott, you posted this mid-month that Walker had tweeted a very vague tweet.
He tweeted.
In which he said, "Georgia on my mind." He was revving up a car. He gets out of the car. He says, "I'm getting ready and we can run with the big dogs," whatever the hell that means.
And he had a Georgia license plate on the back of his car.
It could just mean he's excited about spring practice at UGA. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I don't think that's it.
Who knows? Come
on. The writing's on the wall, boys. The writing's on the wall.
No, has anybody
elicit a statement from Herschel Walker saying, yes, he's thinking about it. He's not 100% in. He's thinking about it, and he will decide very soon.
But the car he was in had a Georgia license plate. We don't know if it was actually his car or someone else's car, whatever the case may be. But as far as we know, he's not moved back to Georgia.
Right.
Well, I mean,
we don't know that he has.
He called the car by a nickname. He said, "I call this car the Hulk" in his little video. And he ready, and I'm getting ready. And then he shows his license plate on the back of the car. I think he probably moved to Georgia, bro. I'm just saying.
Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I'm just saying.
He didn't, but I think the writing is on the wall here.
Maybe it is. But I mean, as far as we know, he hasn't. Last we heard, he was a resident of Texas, and that's pretty much that. Right. But I mean, I also know right now we have only a handful of candidates. We have Kelvin King, who like Herschel Walker is black. We have Latham Sadler, who was a backbench staffer inside of the Trump White House. We have Kelly Loeffler may or may not run. Buddy Carter,
the ag commissioner, Gary Black is running, and he says he's running whether Herschel is or not.
Who has won statewide 3 times now. We have Buddy Carter, who probably isn't running if Herschel Walker runs.
Right.
So very quickly, it's starting to become a crowded field, and if especially if Walker does announce, so it's going to be pretty interesting come next year.
So Eric Erickson in his newsletter this morning, I thought, made a really good point of warning for a candidate like Herschel Walker. these celebrity candidates come along. Herschel's not familiar with the political landscape and how things work. Grifters will come out of the woodwork to try to suck up his money and won't really give a crap whether Herschel makes a fool of himself or runs a credible campaign. I mean, I think, look, I'm a Georgia Tech fan. Okay, so I am. This is in no way meant disrespectfully to Herschel Walker. He's got a lot of selling to do to me. He's gonna really have to convince me, because what I'm interested in as now just a run of the mill backbench Republican guy who has no stroke. I want to know, can he beat Raphael Warnock, and can he hold up? What does he stand for? Can he do this job, and can he give a credible run to Raphael Warnock? And I don't know. Time will tell whether he can do that or not.
And don't forget the Oppo book on Walker is going to be, there's going to be things in there that they're going to be pretty hard punches.
If you're Buddy Carter and you saw the tweet of Herschel Walker revving his car and getting out and walking to the back saying, "I'm ready, he's ready, we ready," and you see that license plate, what's the thought you have if you're Buddy Carter?
Well, it looks like I'm running for re-election in the House.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn. I mean, that's somewhere Buddy Carter went, crap.
Now I'm stuck in the House. I'm on an A committee, Energy and Commerce, that really can't do. I mean, he's only got one committee assignment, and that's it, Energy and Commerce, which ain't a bad committee to be on. It's a pretty powerful one as far as things go in the House of Representatives. It's like that and Ways and Means, and pretty much that and Ways and Means, So, but I mean, look, there are worse gigs to have, but he's going to have to wait a while. But Ossoff will be up for re-election in what, 2026. So,
Oh, that's half a decade away. We're fine. This is fine.
So
this is fine as the fire comes up around me.
Before we leave this subject, Jason, as our resident University of Georgia expert, former President Trump raised something that I'm very interested in. He talked about how Georgia has the ballad. There are the ballads about Herschel Walker, and that people in Georgia sing them all the time, daily, it sounds like.
Can you please sing a few bars for us, Jason? Would you please just hum a few bars?
Is this something that happens, some secret ritual that happens during tailgates in Athens, or what's? Tell us what you know, Jason.
Sing the song, Jason.
I know of no such song, although I am Googling, and there is a dog on Dogs 24/7. Somebody writes, does anybody remember the song that was played during every game? That is horrible sentence fragmentation. When a Herschel play was being called.
It's UGA, Jason.
Yeah. Wait.
That's fair. So anyway, maybe there was a song. I'm not aware of it. Of course, I was like weeks old when Georgia won the national championship in 1980. So there's that. So I know of no such ballad.
Well, Donald Trump knows the song. He's familiar with it, and maybe
I want to hear him sing it.
Yeah, maybe he can come when he comes down here to campaign or comes up here from Mar-a-Lago to campaign for Herschel. He'll sing it for us.
I need to hear Donald Trump singing the ballad to Herschel Walker. That's on my bucket list now, and I'm sorry, it's involuntary. It had to go on there.
So maybe because this doesn't have his USFL stat. So maybe it followed Herschel from Georgia to wherever he played at in the USFL because
New Jersey.
Yeah, it was in New Jersey, New York. Yeah,
Generals. Yeah,
that's right. And Trump owned the team.
Yeah,
and then he ran the league into the ground.
Yeah, and look, that's where the connection with Trump and Walker comes from. Is
right.
He lured him away. Trump lured him away from the NFL. He's one of those. I mean, one of the early, really huge college stars that decided to go to the USFL instead of the NFL, and Herschel got a ton of money to do that.
So I got some news for you guys. Georgia wants its 16 electoral college votes back. At least that's what State Senator Brandon Beach says.
Yes.
He says we want our he says we could do it via the 12th Amendment, because I wonder which version he's looking at, because I don't see it in my copy of the Constitution.
Brandon,
which
that's
is
not
right
Brandon.
here, by the way.
Brandon, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Yeah, there was video. Apparently, there earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, there was a conference, a Women for Trump conference in Atlanta, and a talk show host named John Fredericks was interviewing.
Who is batshit crazy? Sorry, go ahead, Buzz.
Guano.
Interviewing Senator Beach and talking about audits, which I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. There's not an audit currently taking place in the state of Georgia, is there? Rico has a lawsuit to try to start one, right?
They were trying to get an audit done down in Henry County, and they filed a lawsuit there. It was assigned to Judge Brian Amaro, who's been on the bench in Henry County since maybe 2006.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I it all kind of, to me, ties in with this QAnon thing that Trump apparently believes that he will be Georgia and Arizona and the other states will find so much fraud that they'll withdraw their electoral votes, and Trump will then be reinstated as president. So it's to me it's kind of sad to see Brandon Beach, who I think is an otherwise has been credible, worked hard on various issues that he's very passionate about, not a dumb guy, but he's playing around with this kind of stuff, and that's sad to see in my mind.
Well, there's so much I could say. Do I really want to, though?
Yeah, you do.
I mean, look, Brandon is a panderer. That's just it. He introduces messaging bills with no intention of ever getting them passed. He had a messaging bill last year that would have prevented out-of-state students from receiving scholarships to attend Georgia schools. Mm-hmm. Nothing he actually intended to pass. Like, he didn't really put a lot of muscle behind it. He just wanted something to campaign on.
Yeah.
And that's what he does. He's a panderer.
I guess we should disclose, Scott, you and I, that we are close friends with and we're big supporters of Michael Caldwell.
Yes.
Who ran for the state Senate.
Yes.
At the time to fill the vacancy that Brandon was creating by running for Congress.
Yeah, we can.
And then
when
Brandon,
say that, yes.
Yeah, and
however,
then Brandon decided not to run, and we maintained our loyalty to our friend.
But that's not where my disgruntlement with Brandon Beach comes from. I served in the same legislative delegation as him.
Yeah.
And what I saw time and time again is somebody who was completely comfortable in his own skin, saying one thing in public while campaigning and acting differently when he entered the chamber in the state Senate. And that's what he does. He'll stand in front of a crowd and he can give a great speech about how hardcore Republican conservative he is. And then at the end of the day, he's willing to sell out for whatever reason. And that's the truth, man. I hate to say it. And I hate to be the one that has to say it. But my lack of respect for his work was seated well before he decided to jump back in a state Senate race. It had to do with the fact that time and time again, he sold out to whoever was the highest bidder at the time. And right now, the highest bidder are Trump supporters who want to believe that the election was stolen and not lost, and that there must be fraud, and that the president could not have possibly lost under any other circumstances because they love him so much. And so Brandon doesn't have any love for Trump. Brandon has love for Brandon. And so what he's doing right now, very transparently, frankly, is feeding into this idea that he is the champion for Trump because he recognizes that there are people who will go to bat for him because of that.
Yeah.
I guess since we're speculating here, how does that play, Scott, in his state Senate seat, which then begs the question, why is he playing so hard to this? I can't imagine the Fulton side of his district is all geeked up about this.
The only thing that makes sense, Buzz, is he's planning to move up. I mean,
but not in the 6th congressional district, right? This is not the campaign. No. This is not the platform you build to go take on Lucy McBath, right?
No, the rumor that I'm hearing is that he's planning on running to replace Jody Heiss. That's what I'm hearing.
I mean, he doesn't have to live in the district, but that's a stretch.
Yeah, it is a stretch, because then you kick into how Brandon's longtime, very passionate support for transit. How is that going to
that's not going to work in the
voters of the 10th going to think about that?
Yeah, that's not going to work in
Walton County.
That's not going to work out in Walton County. That's not going to work. Yeah. That's not going to work literally anywhere between Walton County and the South Carolina state line. It's the most rural of rural. Go ahead, Scott.
You know, Buzz asked the question about his current seat and how it sits. You know, I live in Cherokee County. I love my community. That we are Trump supporters here. Period. There is no more to discuss. We love our Donald Trump here in Cherokee County. I'm not making apologies for it, because the people here do, in fact, support the former president of the United States. And there's a strong section of our activists who continue to support the former president. And Brandon wants their support. He's never had it before. He's always had to go outside of the hardcore Republicans that are in Cherokee County in order to get his support. He's always going to the ancillary groups, never within the party, but he's been showing up to Cherokee County Republican Party meetings lately, and they've been cheering him as a hero.
Yeah.
So
that could be a simple an explanation, right?
They're going to love him for it.
Yeah, it could just be he's batting down, shoring up the GOP base to fend off a potential challenge. So,
but here's the problem: as a leader of people, that you need to at certain point be honest with them about what is happening. Okay, there are so many people who honestly they honestly believe the election was stolen. We have to recognize that is what they believe. Okay, regardless of how they got to that point of view, and a lot of them live in my neighborhood. A lot of them live in my district, and the Senate district where I live as well. And so, at a certain, I think, as a leader, though, you're obligated to try to lead people towards truth. But Brandon is so scared of his shadow of losing an election that he's not willing to go out on a limb to advocate for truth if it's not popular.
And look, these days, you don't have to go out and try to confront that. You don't have to go out and go to the Cherokee GOP meeting and saying, you're all idiots for believing the election.
No.
You don't have to do that.
Right.
All you have to do is say, folks, we're focused on 2022. We got to protect, keep the governor's mansion. We got to defeat Warnock. I mean, it's we got to stop Biden and his crazy agenda. That's all you got to do.
And we're back. Sorry about that. I had a technical glitch on my end that caused me to accidentally hit stop. So sorry. I guess Buzz. It was the NSA.
We know. Yeah, they got tired of spying on Tucker Carlson, so they're coming after us now.
That is indeed what happened.
We need far more interesting lives anyway.
Moving on to our final segment. I do have one more thing I would like to note towards the end of the podcast. Moving on to our final segment. State Senator Tyler Harper has announced his campaign for the Republican nomination for Agriculture Commissioner. As we already noted, Gary Black is running for United States Senate. So that has opened up that particular office statewide. I don't really know much about Tyler Harper other than he got elected first in November 2012. He chairs the Natural Resources and Environment Committee in the Senate and is ex officio of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, which is is going to have. I mean, he would have. Obviously, that has jurisdiction over a lot of the stuff he'll be covering as Agriculture Commissioner. So, guys, you probably know him better than I do. So I'll let Buzz go first here.
Yeah, Senator Harper, I think, has earned a lot of respect with people from my viewpoint. Earned a lot of respect for people from the during his time there in the Senate. He's not a bomb thrower. He seems to work very hard on legislation that he really cares about, and he has spent a lot of time working on legislation that impacts his district there in South Georgia. And so I think I don't know that he's a farmer himself, although he did graduate from ABAC. And so I think he knows a little bit, at least a little bit, about what he's talking about. And anybody who grows up down there knows farmers, knows farming. So I think he'll be able to speak credibly on these issues, and I would expect that he'll be a very formidable candidate. I have no idea who else might get into this race, but I would think that Senator Harper would be a very formidable candidate.
Yeah. Tyler Harper, I like Tyler a lot. Yeah, I think he's a great guy. He This is a surprise to no one here at Peach Pundit that he's decided to get in this race. We've been talking about this for quite some time. Our little rumor mill had spit his name out for this for ages ago. We let everybody know that he was considering a run. He was at the state convention. He hosted a hospitality suite where he was indicating that he was going to do something, and this makes the most sense, obviously. He actually ran his announcement video. I thought was extraordinarily well done.
Yeah.
He uses the verbiage. He lifted the verbiage from "It Takes a Farmer." Who was the old guy he used to? And Good Day, the old radio guy, Paul Harvey. Yeah. So Paul Harvey had a piece called "It Takes a Farmer," and he lifts it, and he, over the images of him in South Georgia talking with farmers and what have you. And he is an ABAC graduate. Our state constitution has a little quirk about the agriculture commissioner, that they must have a practical farming. They must be a practical farmer in order to hold that position, to be qualified for the position. And so being an ABAC graduate would certainly help him and his bona fides for that. He is, he's going to be very formative. What I think it also, if I could segue a little bit in redistricting, it'll create an opening down there that allows those South Georgia House members to kind of have some flexibility in considering whether they want to run for the state Senate.
Yeah.
Guys like Sam Watson or Dominic LaRicchia, who's one of the governor's House floor leaders, or even a Clay Perkle, who is down that way. Having the ability and the flexibility to be able to have that as an option as we go into redistricting is going to create some flexibility for them. So maybe they don't have to run against each other down there, because they're going to have to contract somewhat in their numbers. And so that's an ancillary benefit to Tyler running for the Republicans in South Georgia.
Yeah.
Well, and the final thing I want to bring up is, I don't know about you guys, but it's been really hard for me to get meetings or take meetings in Washington, D.C. on the Hill. But last week I had my first meetings on the Hill in more than a year. Wow. And it was, so I had to put my suit on, which was a little snug. I may not have caught COVID-19, but I certainly gained the COVID-19. But I had 4 meetings on last Wednesday. And actually, as well as 2 meetings with senators, Senators Grassley, Senator Paul. That was a lot of fun to go back on the Hill and to walk around the Russell building. And well, I guess we were Russell, Dirksen, and Hart. We did all 3. Still haven't been on the House side in a while, but
when I grow up, can I follow you around?
No.
You got to keep up.
Your name has been said on the floor of the House of Representatives. Mine has not. The best I've gotten is the House Judiciary Committee.
Well, probably Nancy Pelosi has Googled you, Scott, and now there's a picture of your face at the security stations and the
public enemy number 7003.
I tell you what, Scott, one of these days when you find yourself with a free week, why don't you come up to DC with me? I drive. You can just meet me at my house. We'll drive up to DC and you can come hang out on the Hill with me for a little bit.
Accepted.
Really?
Let's make that happen. Yeah. No questions asked. Let's make it happen.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I'll clear it with my roommates. Make sure you can stay with me there. They were, my sister came with me last week. It's actually really cool. My sister, it was her first trip to Washington, DC. She had never been before. She's 10 years older than I am. So she's 50. And she had never been to DC. Not everything is open. You have to get tickets to stuff. The Smithsonian's are still closed. At least they were closed as of last week. She did get tickets to Smithsonian Zoo. But she ended up just walking around and seeing monuments. She went to Arlington. I took her to the Jefferson Memorial, which is my favorite memorial in Washington, D.C. Which is why I had the fresh memory of what quotes were displayed there. But she also went down to Mount Vernon, which I've never done. And she went to
Mount Vernon.
Yeah, I've never been. I want to go, but it was just really cool.
My guy.
It was really cool to just finally get to walk around the Capitol. Obviously, you still can't go through the Capitol complex because it's still fenced off. But it was still cool to walk around. I mean, I walked around right in front of the Supreme Court, which reminded me of the old days, like in the long ago, in the before COVID. So hopefully, as COVID continues to dissipate and as the tensions on the Hill relax a little bit more, because they are slowly relaxing, at least in terms of January 6th, certainly not on other things. The Hill will open up a little bit more, and I can start doing my pre-COVID routine, which was basically just dropping into Congressman Loudermilk's office and stealing all the Cherry Coke Zero I want.
And peanuts.
North Carolina peanuts. I didn't really like the Georgia peanuts. The North Carolina peanuts are a far superior product.
Get the hell out of here.
I mean, I've
never had them, so I can't.
There is no office on the Hill that gives out Diet Pepsi like Georgia gives out Coke. Although the Texas offices do have Diet Dr. Pepper, if I recall.
But is it crack Coca-Cola?
No, sir. But with that, I do want to note before we go also that we had some sad news today. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld passed away this afternoon, or at least today. I don't know if it was this afternoon. So condolences to his family. But anybody else got anything for the good of the order before we officially sign off here?
We're not
Go
doing
Hawks, man.
That ranked presidents thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not really Georgia based unless you want to talk about
Jimmy Carter
being in the middle of the pack somehow. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. So there was a C-SPAN today had the new listing. It's a historian survey of the presidents that of the United States presidents, going through 45 Donald Trump. Number 1 on the list is Lincoln, 2 Washington, 3 FDR, 4 Theodore Roosevelt. Eisenhower rounds out the top 5. You also got Truman, Jefferson, Kennedy, Reagan, Obama. That is the rest of the top 10.
How is Obama even close to Reagan?
We will come back to that. The bottom 5, starting at number. I guess the bottom 5 starting with number 40, William Henry Harrison, Donald Trump, Franklin Pierce, Andrew Johnson, and James Buchanan. So, but Trump loses out to Hoover.
Where's Nixon? He's only way down there, isn't he?
So
that's actually a really good point. Where is Nixon?
He's like in the middle. The rubric they're using.
He's 31.
Yeah, I mean
31.
The bottom third. So the question I have is, they're surveying historians. First of all, if you look at the historical rankings that, this is on C-SPAN, we'll post the link so you guys can see what we're talking about. For a long time, they had FDR ahead of George Washington. And it is only recently that George Washington took over the number 2 spot.
Yeah, in 2000, the 2000 survey, because they show the previous 3. So they show this year's and the previous 3. So in 2000, FDR was ranked number 2 and Washington was ranked number 3. But Washington has been number 3 now for number 2 for the third consecutive survey. And by the way, if I was ordering this, it would look much, much different.
Yeah, it definitely would if I was as well, because Andrew Jackson is indescribably high on this.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. How about Wilson? I bet Woodrow Wilson is way, way too high. He should be like
13.
He should perennially be 45.
He is
46 and 47.
I don't know about that. He's number 13. I do note that George W. Bush has moved up, because when this first came out, after he left office in 2009, he was ranked 36. He is now ranked 29.
Yeah, good.
Jimmy Carter was ranked 22 when this first came out. He is now 26.
Yeah, he's going down. W should be going up.
Wilson's
way too
Bill
high.
Clinton was a little too high.
Clinton's fallen off some. He started out in 2000. He was ranked 21. That was he was. I don't know why they ranked him technically his last. Well, I guess that makes sense. Trump got ranked this year, so he was 21. Then he dropped down to 14. Then dropped down to 15. Or excuse me, went up to 14, then went down to 15, and now is at 19.
But Barack Obama at number 11, right behind
10.
Ronald Reagan. 10, right behind Ronald Reagan, right?
Yep, 10. Mm-hmm.
Is amazing to me. That I was floored when I looked at it. I was like, holy cow, how is Barack Obama even close to Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I sent this around to a couple of friends today. They said Coolidge got gypped too because he's listed
Yeah.
24th, which is actually higher than he was ranked in 2000. He was 27 in 2000. But
He did make the list of biggest movers, right? Coolidge did. So did Grant. Grant, I think, climbed many spots.
So
kind of reassess
but
his.
Grant was like scandal ridden, right? I mean,
he was. He was, and like I guess the one that if I was doing this, my top 5 would probably be Cleveland for the sheer fact that he vetoed more legislation than any president other than FDR. But of course, FDR served 3 full terms. So he would be number 1. Coolidge would probably be number 2. I don't know. It gets tricky when it gets to number 3. I don't know. I would probably say God, that's a tough one. They all sucked after that. Can I just say that I just have a top 2 and that's it?
Washington sucked. Are you serious? Get out of here.
I mean, I would no. I mean, I am not the Washington fan that you guys are.
Because you hate America.
No, I mean, look. Not only did he make Alexander Hamilton Secretary of the Treasury, and Hamilton had a very is what that American capitalism. And although I'm a big fan of free market capitalism, I would dare say that what Hamilton envisioned as American capitalism is not what I envision as very different. It's very mercantilist, protectionist even. So not a huge fan of that. And also, I mean, Hamilton was just a snake in the grass. So there's that.
So how do you feel about Jefferson then?
I have mixed feelings on Jefferson and his presidency, because I think generally speaking, he was fine until you get towards the end of his presidency, when his answer towards the brewing tensions in Europe was to close off trade with everyone. And that didn't seem, he thought so little of his presidency, he didn't even want to include it on his tombstone. So yeah, I mean, Jefferson would probably be still in the top 5, but I mean, it's hard for me to go like who to rank them. It's hard for me to rank them. I mean, I was going to rank them. I have a soft spot for Reagan. Yeah. Really?
No, Reagan would definitely be top 5 for me.
Yeah, Reagan would probably be top 5 for me. Although I have qualms about his presidency, there was a lot of good stuff that came out of it too.
Yeah, I mean, there were things. Obviously, all of them had to deal with things that, in a historical context, we have the benefit of looking backwards and saying, well, that was probably not the right thing to do at the time. But as human beings, when you're in an elected position, you have to make decisions based on the information you have at the moment. I can look back at my own legislative career and say there were certain things I was wrong about. At the time, I felt like I was right. But now I look back on it, it's like, maybe I wasn't right about that.
Buzz, I want to give you a chance to weigh in here, because I know you have some presence. So I have a couple of things I want to note before we take off.
Yeah, I think I guess in my top 5, I'd put Washington number 1, just because it had never been done before. And he had the foresight to step away from power, when really there were many who were offering it to him. He could have been president for life if he'd have wanted to, and that would have set a bad precedent. So just on that, I think I put Lincoln number 2, just because he, I know that's controversial in some quarters, but he saved the Union. And, things will be a whole lot different if he had not been there. For me, I put Reagan number 3, and I'd put Coolidge number 4, and for 5, boy, I don't know. That's where it gets tough.
Eisenhower.
Yeah, Eisenhower. Look, I mean, he was underappreciated at the time, I think. But as you look back and you see things he did, things he wanted to do, things that he, the legacy he left was pretty strong. So yeah, Ike at number 5 is pretty good.
Yeah, I would adopt Buzz's list as my own, with Eisenhower at 5.
So I do note that Nixon, because we noted Nixon earlier, he is in the bottom 3rd, but he's number 31. Just given the last 4 years, it is kind of surprising he's as high as he is, given the parallels that were drawn between him and Donald Trump and the corruption and scandal that plagued both administrations. So I think that's pretty interesting that he's as high as he is. Also, I think
there were consequential things that he did.
EPA, the Department of Education.
Well, so they actually
bad things too.
Yeah, well, in the EPA. So, but like looking at, and he also started the war.
Vietnam.
He started the war on drugs too. Which has been consequential as well. But like, so they break it out into individual categories, leadership characteristics. So you have public persuasion, crisis leadership, economic management, moral authority, international relations, administrative skills, relations with Congress, vision setting an agenda, pursued equal justice for all, performance within context of the times. He actually ranks really high on international relations. He's middle of the pack on the top 3: persuasion, leadership, economic management. He's relations with Congress, very low. Moral authority, very, very low. Sure. And that's interesting also in the confines of Donald Trump. His highest leadership characteristic is public persuasion. Then he see that. Yeah, I can too.
He built a very loyal following, you know.
Yeah,
a lot of presidents would envy.
Yeah, I can too. And his economic management he's 34, which, you know, I don't think he gets enough credit for. I mean, I think he was indifferent in terms of what policies were pursued, but his administration, deregulation, tax cuts, I give him credit for those things where they're due. But
he handled COVID better, that would have had a better. It probably would have risen, caused him to rise up higher on that ranking too, because the economy wouldn't have been hammered as much.
Moral authority, administrative skills, relations with Congress, performance within the context of history. He's near the bottom. He's like at or near the bottom. The one that I think is pretty notable, and I'm actually surprised he didn't score a little lower, was crisis leadership. Yeah. But moral authority really striking because
you have to compare him in context to other presidents and how they handled crises, I guess.
Yeah, and you can look at all that stuff on the page, which we'll link to at peachpundit.com. You can see who ranks worse, and the people who rank worse: Franklin Pierce, Andrew Johnson, James Buchanan. And Johnson, I would argue, in the context of history, had a lot more to deal with than Donald Trump did.
Yeah, he did. He was trying to.
But these things, it's really tough to judge. I mean, I think it's we'll see Trump's ratings change over time because you'll start. I mean, there are things that he did. For his impact on the Supreme Court is enormous. The Abraham Accords that he signed, if those hold, the tremendous impact on history. So I think, it's tough to judge. It's tough to judge presidents a year after they've left office, whether you like them or not.
Yeah, I mean, immediately upon leaving office is when they're all really bad guys, right? And it's like the old Batman quote. You can die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, and two-term presidents become the villain eventually. Yep. And it's only in time that we see the context of their decisions and their real impact.
And again, we've already noted George W. Bush, when he left office, he came in at 36, and today we view he's number 29. He's moved up. Mm-hmm. He's still middle, like the bottom of the middle, but maybe leading off the bottom third.
How about this guy? Where's he at?
I can't tell who that is.
It's my little figurine of President Bush.
H.W.
Bush. Yeah.
He is number 21. He ranks just 2 spots below Clinton, and he is in grand a sandwich between them. So he stayed relatively stable. When in 2000 he was 20, in 2009 he was number 18, 2017 he was number 20, and then this year he's 21. So, but like I said, we'll post this at peachpundit.com for those of you who are just listening to us rather than watching us.
Yeah.
Anyway, make sure you download, like, subscribe, all the things, Apple Podcasts, and check this out on YouTube, and make sure you're visiting peachpundit.com. We don't post every day, but when we do post, it's usually something interesting. So, Buzz, hope you continue feeling better. Scott, I mean, you're all right.
I love you too, bro. I love you too.
Y'all have a good one. Happy Independence Day weekend.
Go Hawks.
Indeed, go Hawks, because even I'm checking the scores to see what's going on. All right.
Buzz has me checking NBA scores. That's amazing.
Love it, man.
Actually, you're the reason I know. Buzz is the sole reason I know how the Hawks are doing. Because it's
I
either
follow
on
Buzz on Twitter, so yeah, I know too.
yeah, it's either Buzz on Facebook or Buzz on
I'm
on
loving
Twitter.
it, man. This is the most exciting Atlanta sports thing and that I could, for me, ever.
I will not buy an Atlanta Hawks jersey of a current player because I know nothing about them, but I would go buy Dominique Wilkins jersey.
Go get a Okongwu jersey, man,
Who?
number 17.
I thought Trae Young was like the hero.
Yeah, he's a star, but man, rookie from USC, 00, man, he's playing a great great minutes every night. It's awesome.
There are 3 jerseys of Hawks players I would buy: Dominique, Spud Webb, and Kevin Willis.
Spud Webb all day long.
Yeah,
Spud Webb all day long because I'm only like 2-3 inches taller than he is.
Yeah.
But he could still dunk over you at his.
He could still dunk over me at his current height.
5 times the vertical. Yeah, I mean, he was my hero too, and 5 times my vertical leap. But
dude, what was it? He won the 86 slam dunk contest, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
he sure did.
Yeah, because that dude. He was a badass. He was a badass.
He was.
Spud Webb, you have a standing invitation to join the Peach Pundit Podcast so we can talk about what it was like to be a short man in the NBA and to win the slam dunk contest. So anyway, with that, happy Independence Day weekend. We'll see you guys soon.
Yep. Bye, y'all.